Okay. So what Dawn put on the table was the idea of multiple offers on the as a listing agent, and how are you tracking them all? And a few months ago, Debbie came on one of our 9 o'clock calls and then did a separate class on it, where what she's doing, or what she's created, is she's created a landing page that she sends all of the buyer's agents to, right? And so in the instructions in her listings, it says, please present all offers at this URL. And the buyer's agents need to go to that URL and put in the information that she asks for. And what's cool about that is that landing page, that website, then takes all that information that each person puts in and organizes it in a Google spreadsheet on the back end. So that then all she has to do is kind of open that Google spreadsheet and she has all the data in there. For those of you who were on the Zoom call earlier this week, I can't remember what day it was, maybe it was even late last week, Command has another version of that, where if you put the offers in, the information in a certain manner inside of Command will kind of tally it up and give you a document, a line by line comparison of the offers. So either way, I think that whether you use Command or you use the Google spreadsheet kind of landing page idea, it organizes things in a way that you don't have to actually sit and draw the grid. As I'm talking, I'm trying to find this on YouTube, and I'm not finding it just yet, but I will. And if I find it, I'll put the link in the chat. But I know, and if she has to teach another one, just by the way, she'd be happy to do that as well. But that's the idea Dawn's talking about. Does anybody else use any other kind of system to organize the multiple offers in such a way that it's simpler?
Rick, it's Tam.
Hey.
I for multiple offers, I've created an Excel spreadsheet that sounds very similar to like what Debbie extrapolates out of her whatever she uses. Sorry, the main system. So it's just comparing. Is it cash? Is it what percent's down? If it's a mortgage, is there inspections? Is there mortgage contingencies, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a basic spreadsheet if anybody wants me to shoot it to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if you can, if it's available to you, you can just upload it into the chat and people can grab that from there if that's simple.
No, I'm driving. No.
Yeah, well, if you're driving, then don't do that. But yeah, what we'll do is I'll send you the yeses that we got in the chat and their emails, and if you can send that off, that'd be awesome. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is any version to organize it really kind of helps. I agree, Karen, that idea of sharing that spreadsheet. Oh, hold that up again, Dawn. Wait, let me spotlight you so people can see it big. Hold on. There we go. Love that. And what's cool is what Debbie built is a similar, it looks kind of similar to that. It's not quite as fancy as what you just held up, but and it auto populates based on the buyer's agent's answers in a Google in Google Sheets, right? So there's the question that she had for me when she was first showing it to me is, do you think buyer's agents will follow directions and actually go there? And I said, well, just force the issue. Don't accept it any other way, right? Put that in the thing, and then if someone calls or texts you, say, yeah, we're accepting offers via this one portal, and the portal is this. And so she just did that and didn't accept things any other way except via that portal. Nobody gave her a hard time. Trust me, people want to get their offers accepted, so they'll stand on one leg out in the rain if that's what you tell them to do, right? Awesome. So what else is? Yes, Silva.
Thank you. So I wanted to give you an example how I won a multiple offer bid, which was not the highest and not the best. However, Tammy Kranich, sorry, Karen, in your powerful red that I'm not talking about you right now, but maybe in the future we will do this together. So Tammy Kranich, she actually called the listing agent. They had 7, 8 offers, and my client gave ridiculously high offer, which was not the highest, as the listing agent shared with me later. But what actually won the offer was Tammy Kranich's call. She called the listing agent. She spoke very highly about our client. She gave her the second and third and fourth layer of reassurance that we are going to deliver. And at the end, the listing agent told me that they were sellers were very impressed. It was an estate on top of everything. So we had lots of heirs there. Everyone was very much impressed by the way the offer was presented, which I always write a cover letter, which is amazing. And I run it by the buyer to make sure that they agree with what I'm writing in it. And then they were super impressed with the way we presented this offer, and we won.
Yeah, so do remember, your mortgage partners are more than happy to call listing agents. I think Karen was talking about that yesterday in whatever we were doing yesterday, right? And so recognize that it's not only about who has the best rates and all that stuff. It's who's going to offer those services to reach out. I love the idea of the loan officer talking directly with the listing agent. It helps so much, right? Yeah, online lenders, my experience is run in the opposite direction, and tell your buyers to run in the opposite direction. Rates are so freaking crazy low that there's just no reason for them to use online lenders. I think the reason that they came to prominence is because people thought they would get better lower rates, and that's simply not true, right? You can't get lower than the 3s, guys. I mean, it does, or else someone will be paying you, right? So just make sure that people understand, if your buyers are concerned about the 0.1% when rates are in the 3s, they maybe need to consider whether they should hold off and buy a house at a later date, right? Because those rate shoppers, when rates are so low, that concerns me that maybe they're spending too much money, they're buying too high, right?
Just remember, those ads that you see are advertising. If they advertise low, then that's, brings the calls in. And if you advertise what's available or what you really can lock in for, it doesn't always look as attractive as something that's a 1/4 point lower than what you can get. Remember, when you're advertising, you are not looking for somebody to lock in that day. You're waiting until they find the house. You're waiting until they get their offer accepted, till they have their contract in place. So just, it's advertising, it's marketing, it works.
Yeah. And I'll say this about that. There are 2 versions of mortgage that I advise people to run away from. And the first is online lending, and the second is big banks. And if you'll notice, we have 3 mortgage partners. None of the 3 of them are a big bank, even though we have been constantly approached by big banks to become a partner. And none of them is an online lender, right? Even Keller Mortgage, if you count Keller Mortgage as a 4th partner, is becoming less and less of an online lender based on how they're kind of working their loans nowadays. So I would be careful about, like, when I have a mortgage in place, I want to know that if I call enough times and Karen hears the phone, like that she'll pick it up and say, like, I'm in the tub. What do you want? I will say usually what I get is, oh, hi, how are you? Yeah, I have no life, so I thought I'd pick up the phone call. But see, that's powerful to me. to know that in an emergency, I know I can actually reach out and physically touch somebody and get answers. Those are clear. So that's a lot of answer to online lending, but that's my personal opinion about that. So what else with multiple offers? Anything else on the list side as a listing agent? Anything you're doing to make sure that you're taming the chaos a bit? I'll tell you one of the things that go ahead, Dawn.
Just real quick, I came across this, we did have multiple offers on another listing, and the agents are not truthful. They are saying that it's like a 5% conventional, and then, or a 10% conventional, and then all of a sudden they're pushing the FHA mandatory clause at us. And we went with them and declined other FHAs with, higher percentage down, but not higher, but better credentials. So how do we defend it? I mean, how do we know? I mean, do we talk, other than, I guess calling the lender, is that each and every time?
Well, yeah, so it's a great question. And I think that, when people say things out loud to me about, their reputation, what you just said, that to me is what reputation is all about, is that if I'm going to present something to you, it's not going to change. It's going to be what it's going to be, unless the buyer's agent is completely in the dark around it. Sometimes that's hard for me to believe. It's not always hard for me to believe, but it's sometimes hard for me to believe, because it certainly can happen. But so how do you guard against it? The next time that agent brings an offer, you discuss with your seller, look, the last time they represented somebody, this is what happened. And I love the idea of making a phone call to the lender, right? Verifying what is being presented to make sure that they're being truthful, and that it's why one of the reasons that in the anatomy of a seller transaction that we run through in Ignite at the end of the listing piece, one of the pieces in there is make sure at some point that the buyer, like when you're the listing agent, make sure the buyer has actually made application with the company that they gave you the pre-approval letter for, right? Because I've been caught as a listing agent where, Karen issues the pre-approval letter and everything's all hunky-dory, and then all of a sudden they're closing with some online, rocket ship mortgage or whatever it is, or for me, it was the Royal Bank of Scotland, right? And unfortunately, when it's the Royal Bank of Scotland, what it really was the Royal Bank of Scotland, and the money was all in Scotland. And so it created this delay. And as a listing agent, that was a real learning experience for me, because that was a situation where the sellers were buying in Nevada, and the delay that was caused here in Nevada, when you delay your closing as a buyer, there's an automatic statutory per diem that you pay. We don't have that here, right? Everyone can just delay, and unless there's a time of the essence clause in the contract, there's no way to force anybody to close. There's no statutory per diem. In Nevada, there was. So I thought it was kind of my screw up. And the sellers got to pay for that as buyers in their next move, unfortunately. So be really clear about that.
And I think Karen will probably attest to this, is if another agent calls her, well, first of all, it's a contact for her for another agent, and she's going to be truthful with them and say, well, no, they were approved for this, because her reputation is on the line as well. And, they want to be honest with you and, close the deal if they can, but get you as a client, as, also.
Right. But you also have to realize that in some of these purchase prices, like anything under 600, 650, there's a lot of FHA. You have to expect a lot of first-time home buyers, a lot of 3%, 5%, 3.5% down, because that's what they can afford, or the market's so good that they're making money on their money, or those houses need help. And instead of them getting a renovation loan, which we can get for them too, we suggest that they put less down.
It's more about being honest. you know, if you're FHA, you're FHA, and that's fine. I just closed one that was FHA. We didn't have any problem, but it was, you know, just be honest. You bring me an FHA mortgage,
right?
You know.
Yeah, we haven't had any problems with FHA or VA or.
Yeah.
I know Lisa and Silva have their hands up, and I'm going to get there in a second. But to that, you know, as a listing agent, what occurs to me is there are ways around, like, don't run, and don't necessarily advise your sellers to run away from FHA. I think that's a mistake, right? And so the idea of recognizing that it's an FHA, though, there are positives to the FHA side of things, right? And if the concern is, well, there's just not enough down, the question I would ask you is, how many times in your career has the seller actually been awarded a down payment when something went sideways? Right. So if the argument around FHA, because oftentimes people say, no one thinks, oftentimes we don't think far enough ahead to say, well, what I'm really concerned about is any kind of inspection or appraisal that the FHA loan might come with. We stop short of that by saying, oh, there's just not enough down, and so therefore these people aren't as invested. I think that's easily debunked by, so I've been licensed for 21 years, and I have never one time seen a seller that I worked for awarded in court the down payment money when something went sideways. So who cares if it's 3.5% or 35% down? Like, what does it matter? To me, that I think we have to just be cognizant of what's really being said.
So why do you, as realtors, if you don't mind me asking, think that, or why do the sellers think that 30% down is better than 3%? I mean, the borrower then qualifies for more as opposed to less, which is probably a good thing.
I think it's the appraisal.
I have heard many times from listing agents, well, your buyer doesn't have enough skin in the game.
Yeah.
So anything 10% down or
which means
above
that
is okay?
Which means that they expect to be awarded to what Rick just said. They believe that if something happens, you know what I mean? So it's a matter of educating the listing agents, but there are thousands. How do you educate one at a time?
One at a time is exactly the right answer. That's right. So here's where I was going with that. As a listing agent, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so if for some reason the seller comes back and says, you know what, this is really the offer I want to accept, except I'm a little concerned that it's FHA. Well, what if the seller went back to the FHA person? If they really were upset or concerned about not having enough skin in the game, let's not make them wrong. We can give them the statistics around how often they're awarded money, if that would help. But I think strategically, as a listing agent, you can simply say to the seller, well, you know what, if that's the offer you think is the best for you, what if you went back to them and said, look, we will accept your offer. However, your 3.5% down is non-refundable. 3.5% down, non-refundable, I'll take every single day of the week over 10% or 20% or 30% totally refundable. Right. And so what non-refundable means is, unless the sellers themselves decide to back away from the transaction, any choice that the buyers make to exit the transaction, they forfeit that 3.5%.
We've even, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So we've even done on a VA loan where they're not putting any money down, that they do put some money down at contract signing and then get it refunded to them at closing when they get the money from the lender to cover the whole thing.
Yeah, so that it's like the float money, right? So now there's some skin in the game, right? And so I think there are ways, strategically, there are ways through some of that to help people kind of climb over the fact that maybe there's less down. Lisa, you've been waiting patiently. What was your question?
This kind of goes back to what we were talking about prior. I wanted to ask any of the listing agents, because at the moment I seem to be a buyer broker and I am not having luck with any of my first time home buyers in understanding. And I wanted to know, how do you view offers when they come in and they layer up the contingencies and they're starting to put in termite and radon and all of these things? Do you automatically discard those listings, even if they've come in very high, you know, anywhere from 5 to 10% over list?
Anybody want to answer that?
I would say no. Of course, the buyers have the right to do radon and termite. First of all, VA loan cannot be approved without the termite inspection, and you cannot refuse radon. That's my answer to that.
Well, I mean, radon mitigation isn't required by the state. So it's something you can ask for, but the owner can decline. But my question is, of course, I always say to them, have every inspection you want, but don't make it contingent for termite and radon, because those are things that may come up down the line as a homeowner. So just because you have these tests up front doesn't mean termites aren't going to show up later. Doesn't mean radon is not going to show up later. So it's something you really have to maintain. This is what I tell my buyers. But I have found that they keep losing their offers, you know, because it's every contingency known to man.
Yeah, we live in a market right now where people who are insistent on playing it safe and wrapping their offer in bubble wrap will lose over and over and over and over and over again, even if they're willing to pay. Right, you have to be willing to way overpay in order to make up for the term side of things, right? What I've noticed is that sellers and listing agents together are doing a pretty good job of weighing money and terms, right? One is not necessarily always the winner. The listing agents and the sellers are looking at everything, as Silva said. It's not an automatic discard, and they're weighing all the pros and cons, which is the smart, fair way to do things, right? And I think for the most part, we're seeing that that occur in multiple offer situations. But even with money on the high side, if it's too weighed down with terms, sellers get concerned. It's like, you know what? I'd rather have clear sailing for $20,000 less without all these issues. I'd rather make less money.
Yeah, I counsel them and tell them highest and best. Highest is best price, but best is terms. And that the more contingencies you put in, the more you're giving yourself a way out. And when there are multiple offers there, they want a solid offer. They don't want somebody that's looking for every possible chance to change their mind.
That's right. And you know why? Because and I think if we help explain that to the buyers, sellers are afraid of missing out on all the other offers on the table by choosing one that might suck, right? Or that might look kind of nice and that turns kind of sucky later, right? So they're doing everything they can to try and make the best choice possible. Yeah. My recommendation,
I feel like I should have retired for this year because I have nothing but young first-time home buyers who seem to understand real estate more than anybody in the world. And no matter how many examples I give them, try to counsel them, you know, in different ways. And I've even told them to go to the list of inspectors I've given them, or if they have one that they had decided they would use when they have an accepted offer, ask them these questions, ask them about, you know, termites, ask them about radon, ask them about these things, you know, in order to give a better education, you know, which they won't do because I feel like I would have been better off retiring for this past year, just for the year and starting over.
And I think that at the end of the day, that it's all about challenging ourselves to figure out how do I communicate expectations on the front end differently, right? Which is different than better, right? Because Diana Kokoska teaches us that you can't get to better until you get first through different, right? So how can I say things differently? Who else can I involve, right? Can I grab Karen in on a conversation around financing with these with these folks to help them? Somebody said to me recently, one of the things that they're doing with their buyers, and I love this idea, is after losing a couple, sit the buyers down and say, okay, so let's go through your analysis of why this keeps happening. Tell me what you think you need to do differently. You know, clearly we can agree that we need to do something differently. Why do you think this keeps happening? What are your suggestions about what can be done differently to come out on top, right? And you have the facts behind the conversation, but allow them to kind of go through what they're experiencing, or else it just ends up being you guys telling them what they're doing wrong. And that ends up being irritating to everybody.
Yeah,
Right?
I've asked them, you know, in certain instances, because I have explained to them, if you come in with all these contingencies, the only way to get the attention is if you come in with a crazy over the top number. And I said, you know, or in some cases, you know, they assess the value, you know, on their own, which is ridiculous. But then they'll say, well, there's work we need to do. And I mean, these are move-in ready homes and it's personalized aesthetics. And I tell, you know, I've told them in numerous conversations, different ways. That's putting the cart before the horse because you don't have work to do until you have the home. I've told them in ways that, unfortunately, that's not the market. And what many first-time home buyers do is they secure their home and then they work out a budget to save up to make those aesthetic changes. But a seller is not going to finance that for them by a reduced offer.
All of those things are true. My concern is that it sounds to me, and again, I'm not in the room when these conversations are happening, but it sounds to me like there's a lot of telling and not enough asking. So what I would challenge you to do is take all of the things that you just laid on the table, go back to the drawing board and start to convert all of those things into questions. So instead of telling the buyer X, Y, and Z, ask them a question about how they feel about X, Y, and Z. How would they, if they were in the seller's shoes, what would they be doing? Would it surprise you to know that this is ultimately what we've experienced with many clients in the last 12 months? And let them start answering things and involve them more in the conversation is where I would start.
Yeah,
because people are buying houses, right?
Well,
so we've got those.
I agree. I did ask them the question to please tell me where they were coming from so I would have a better understanding of what their feelings were, their concerns were. And they said, well, we're just not educated and we're still trying to become educated with all of this. And until we become that way, we're not willing to give up on the smallest of things. We understand it may be just in our heads only, but that's where we are. And that's when I made the suggestion of them calling, you know, the list of inspectors, tell them I told them to give them a call, you know, and just explain the situation so they could have, you know, a more involved conversation, but they still wouldn't. So,
yeah. Well, like I said, I think that the only way forward in scenarios like that is to challenge ourselves about how we can communicate differently so that we're heard differently. Because remember, we can't stay in a spot of if they were different, I'd be better, right? So if the buyers were better, I'd make more money. We can't stay stuck in that because it's a no-win scenario. Trust me, I've been there. It's like circling the drain, right? And what's frustrating is that you can never climb out of the drain and you never actually drop into the drain. It's just this constant circle. It's like one way or the other would be more helpful. When someone says I need more of X, the follow-up question that I would bring to the table is, you know, I completely understand. Tell me exactly what that looks like for you. How will you know? What does that look like? How will you know when you have what you need to be able to make some of these decisions differently, right? Keep asking and keep asking and keep asking, because some of those things that your buyers are telling you, this is not directed just at Lisa, this is a global conversation. Some of those things that your buyers are telling you, they're just deflection techniques, whether on purpose or unknown to them. They're just ways to delay the inevitable, right? They think that if they delay and deflect enough, something will change in the market so that suddenly things will be different. And I don't see that happening, certainly for the rest of this year. Silva, you have waited patiently. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two things very quickly. To Dawn, when she was talking about truthfulness, I believe that sometimes even the buyer's agents don't know that their clients are going to switch brokers somewhere midway. You know, they may actually be present. This has happened to me so many times, and I know it is super frustrating. So that was one. And the second, to Lisa's point, in 15 years, I've never had a pushback on the radon remediation. I always put my offer like this. Anything that is health and hazardous and structural. Other than that, buyers are taking care of everything else. My building inspection is going to be just for informational purposes. However, we still keep everyone has the right. This is their family, this is their life. And I've never seen a seller to push back on radon. And that's all that I wanted to say, really.
Yeah, everybody has, look, everyone has to make decisions, right? Everyone has to make decisions. Contingency free versus contingency almost free, right? Which is what I would consider the health and safety comment in there. They're different. And so they may be looked at differently by some sellers and looked at the same by other sellers, right? And so as long as the buyers themselves are comfortable with how things are being presented and they're okay then with what happens on the tail end. Again, if they keep losing though, one of the things that you might want to point out is, look, one of the things that the listing agent, by the way, when you lose, are you asking the listing agent why you lost? Right? Because if you're not, I think you're missing an opportunity. Not all listing agents will give you that information. Not all of them will return the phone call or the text, but those who will and do, it's valuable information to be able to go back and help the buyers make different decisions moving forward, right? And so if Silva gets 2 rejections and both of them say, yeah, you know what, we went with someone who was truly contingency free, well, then by the 3rd time with those buyers may need to decide that they're going to remove that health and safety language, or they're going to decide that, you know what, it's too important to them and they're always going to keep it in there and try and figure out a different way to mitigate the offer with more money or something to that effect, right? Karen.
So I am working with a couple. They found a house, we made an offer, was accepted. Then shortly before the closing, the seller bailed out because she said that she was not happy that the mortgage contingency was not waived. And they were working with Bank of America. So the process was extremely slow. We didn't really get answers. And so the whole thing, also it turned out she needed a place to live. She hadn't found one yet. So the whole thing became very weird and fell apart. So now we're looking at other houses. We've been looking at a lot of houses. Every time they find something, they want to make a really low offer. And, no matter what. And I told him, we need to look at the market update. We can't work from the perspective of ego where we want to get a deal because twice it didn't work out. Now, my question is, they're looking in the 550 to 700 range. They looked at houses that were 759 and wanted to offer 700. It didn't work out. I already said, we need to we need to make sure we get a response from the seller. Now, about the FHA loan, what is the top price range that would work for an FHA loan?
The max loan amount is $601,450 in Fairfield County. Yeah. Remember, that's Fairfield County, not the rest of the state.
Right, so that wouldn't work. Excuse me. Anyway.
How much is the purchase price?
Well, we are looking basically 600 to 700. The house that they were buying was listed at 750 and they got it for 710, and that was comfortable. They're authorized to buy higher, but they don't want to. And it's like everything, there's something wrong with everything. Every house has a problem. Either it's they don't like the size of the rooms, they have to do more work on it, they don't like the location. I mean, and so tomorrow we're looking at the 11th house. Mm-hmm. And I sent them, I mean, I'm not showing them everything. I sent them to open houses, just go look, you know?
And so my thoughts there are as follows. First and foremost, are we in the buyer consult, did we build a top 5 must-have list and look at the idea that and state the idea very clearly that there is no such thing as a 100% house, and so because there's no such thing as a 100% house, if it meets 4 out of the 5 of your criteria, it's going to prompt a discussion of an offer, right? So setting those expectations.
I did.
And then the other thought I have is this. It sounds to me like the issues that we're having, and no one's going to like this, so just be prepared for it. The issues we're having aren't really issues of buyers getting their offers accepted. The issue that I hear, the underlying issue that I hear, is a lead generation issue. Because if our lead generation strategies were where they needed to be as business owners, these people that we're struggling with wouldn't matter so much, and we'd move on from them.
Yeah, I was thinking of just, letting them go at this point, even though, but there is a catch-22. I've spent so much time with them and I feel like the next house may be the one.
Yeah. Well, so refer it to somebody, right? So if you're not interested in, and I'm not saying that everybody with every buyer who is a struggle should just walk away. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is sometimes we get stuck in this spot of feeling as though we don't have a whole lot of choice and these are the buyers we have. And so therefore we just have to keep pushing and keep doing. And what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And so, well, what's different? What could we do differently? One of those things is to go back to the drawing board and say, I have so enjoyed our time together. And yet it feels as though this may not be the best time for you to be a buyer. And so what I'd like to do is kind of pair you with a colleague who may be able to assist you at a different level than I can today. You see if you can pass them to somebody else or set them free, or get really on purpose about being really different. And that means really sitting and having a consult that I call it a consult between the eyes, right? Right, because then there's just direct conversation. There's not any kind of whatever, right? Talk to me about the last 3 houses and what you feel we could have done differently to have you come out on top.
I think I feel more urgent and the wife feels more urgent than the husband, because the wife is 6 months pregnant. They don't want to stay in their 1-bedroom apartment. I get it. But he is so determined to get a deal on everything and to point out everything that's wrong with the house that, even with the other one, I mean, we addressed all the inspection issues and I knew that the day of closing, the walkthrough would come on and we'd have another list. So maybe he's not the right client. I think she is, but together they're a headache.
Maybe suggest a divorce.
Yeah, I know, right? Maybe you can move and he can. I don't know.
That's right. Leave him behind.
I know. And so I feel like I'm wasting time talking. I'm wasting time showing, waiting for them. One time they were half an hour late. I'm like, we have a tour, you know? So it's motivation. I think it's not really there. I don't know.
I think that's the assessment. And the reality is that one of the scripts I used to use with buyers who were determined to find a bargain, and these were even in more normalized markets, never mind today.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing was always a question. So it sounds to me like you're looking for a deal. Can you define deal for me? Like, what does deal mean to you? Well, what do you mean? Well, at some point you have to quantify that. Is it 5% below market? Is it $10,000 below the asking price? Is it not paying more than the asking price? Like, what is deal? What's the definition of that for you, so that we can kind of laser target where we can look. And ultimately that's a trick question, because regardless of what he says, the next part of the script is, you know what, now I have clarity around what it is you're looking for. Would it surprise you to know that we just don't have that here?
Yeah, and there were 2 properties that were thinking about it, and then by that time they had an offer, so they don't want to compete. There's another property that is they love. It's still available. I said, let's make an offer. Of course, I want to stay low, but I said, let's just make the offer. Then something else was wrong. Where am I going to put my exercise equipment? I'm like, don't worry about it. We'll put it in the basement. Well, what if my parents come? It's okay. They can still stay there. They have a whole bedroom and whatnot.
Yeah. So you've got to keep going back and reminding them that there is, if please be reminded of our consult 11 houses ago, that there is no such thing as a 100% house. Forgive me, however, it sort of feels to me like you're looking for that 100% house. So talk to me about how we overcome the fact that you're searching for that 100% house.
Okay, I will
right?
tell them that. I have a meeting with them tomorrow, showing them the house. I'm a little concerned that they will find the bedrooms too small, but I think it has all the other boxes checked off. So I'm gonna tell them exactly that.
Yeah.
And I will say, let's just make the offer. Let's just do it.
At some point, right? At some point, people have to, and I'll say, well, hold on. I'm going to pause the recording a second.
Right.
What obstacles do you think you could remove from this home buying purchase that would allow you to come out on top?
Right. So I think that I will tell them, let's just look at the house and see what you like about the house, and then visit the price afterwards, because they're comparing what's wrong with the house to what they think the house is worth. And I told them, it's not about what you think the house is worth. It's about the competition out there and what the seller is willing to sell it for. So we need to meet the price in some.
And so I'm going to challenge, Karen, what you just said, the way I challenged what Lisa said before. What if instead of telling them,
yes,
you went back and rephrased it as a question, right? All of a sudden. And so instead of what you just said, it's the what I can't remember what the line was. What did you just say? You told them?
It's not about what you think the house is worth. It's about what the competition is and what the seller is willing to sell it for.
Right. And so instead of you telling them that, which understand how they hear these things, right? When you guys say things like that to buyers, all of a sudden they turn off their hearing and say to themselves, this person clearly is not on my side. They're clearly on the side of putting a commission in their pocket. And sometimes they verbalize and say, it sounds like you're on the seller's side in this. Anybody ever have someone say that to them, right? In these scenarios? I know I have, right? And so that's where I think it's so important for you to be able to continue to rephrase these statements that we're making as questions, so that perhaps you ask something to the effect of, you know what, I completely hear and understand what it is you're saying. I wonder, what would this look like to you as the seller? I want to just to give you some perspective about what it is they're expecting. So let me set the stage for you. The market conditions are seller's market, seller's market, seller's market. The inventory is crazy short. You're a seller who has 6 or 8 people who are throwing money at you to choose them. How would you adapt what you're doing as a buyer to fit that scenario? Recognizing that in today's market, your strategies thus far have yielded what they've yielded, right? Have them put the other hat on, right? I like the what if conversation. Hey, you know what? Let's take a pause. What if you were the seller? I know you're not, but what if you were the seller? I want to just give you some perspective about what it is they see on their side.
Yeah. Okay.
Because when you show up the way they want to see you, which is different from the way you want to see you, that's when you win. And I'm curious, is winning a house, how badly do you want to live in that house? It sounds to me like maybe not so badly, which is completely fine. However, this may not be the market for you to pursue purchasing a home in, right? Because that's what it is. Anyway, my point is, keep turning it around. We want to provide answers that make sense. My thought is education comes more effectively if we will turn those statements around into questions and allow the buyers themselves to self-discover some of those answers. Yeah. Even if they don't do it verbally, they will be thinking about it. You may send them home that day, and then 3 days later, they call you and say, you know what, Karen, I think we get it now.
Yeah, I'm getting a little tired of them. They're not tired of me, you know?
Yeah, so work a little harder that you can make them tired of you.
I want them to be tired of the search. I said, you're going to have a baby. And, you know, have you thought about life after the birth? You're going to be new parents. The baby has needs. It's going to take, he or she is going to take up space. He's crying, okay? So, and you're working from home.
Yep, all those things. Well, but you know what? In that scenario, with some people, having that baby and experiencing the tight quarters may be exactly the motivation they need to finally come back and say, okay, now we really want to get serious and we want to buy a house.
Maybe so. Maybe
until then, they just may not be able in a place to move there, and that's okay. It doesn't make them wrong. It just makes the timing wrong.
Yeah, no, I'm
right?
Happy to keep them. I just, you know, don't want to bang my head against the wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you.
Well, I talked about that sheet I showed you before. I actually showed it to a difficult buyer that I was working with. I kind of brought it out saying, you know what, I can't believe, you know, I was just like talking with him. I didn't really relate it to him, but I said, this is crazy. I just put this on this weekend. Look at what I have here. You know, and I think he kind of got it. Like he understands now, wow, you know, he keeps asking me, what's the value of this house? What's the value of this house? I'm like, the value is out the window. This is the value, what people will pay for it. So, you know, bringing that out just sort of nonchalantly, like I wasn't sitting him down, putting his heels to the fire. It was just like, look at this. This is nuts. You know, this is what I'm up against. This is why I didn't answer your call last weekend. So no.
That's a great idea. I hope everybody wrote that down. Somebody text that to Karen because she's not in front of her camera. But that's an excellent idea. Show them from the listing agent side, right? Yeah. Even if you're not experiencing that, if you don't have any listings right now, or you haven't had an issue with 6 or 8 of them, fake it. Make one up, right? Make one up and have it fall out of your folder when you're showing a house. Oh my goodness! Oh, you should see this. Look at this. Oh my goodness! You know what this is? This is my last listing, and how we had to parse through 8 different offers. This is kind of why it's so challenging to be a buyer right now. I think that is a great idea.
Yeah, or the house that I sold in a day. Yeah, you know, it's just they go very quickly. Or the other buyers that are represented talk about mortgage, right? The mortgage banker was able to talk to the seller's agent on a Sunday evening. Bank of America can't do that and save the deal.
No.
Yeah, we won the offer, I should say.
Can't and won't. Can't and won't is 100% right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Silva.
Anyway, so whatever.
Thank you. I have a list of properties which sold 30, 40, 50, and 100,000 above asking. And I actually sent them in a multiple offer situation. I also have created a video and I also had written an article. So I send this when we're in a multiple, I send it to them so they know how to prepare.
Yeah, that's really excellent as well. And I'll remind what Silva's putting on the table has everything to do with understanding the stats of the town and or city you're selling in and being smart enough to use them, right? Enough of our towns in Fairfield County right now are at or above 100 or 101% list to sale ratio in the last 30, 60, or 90 days. Do your buyers know that, right? Do your buyers understand what that means? Because what that means is the list price, and you should write this down if you don't use this, the list price is the minimum expectation that the seller currently has.
One
minimum
more thing.
expectation.
Okay,
Say it again, Silva.
yeah, one more thing I just wanted to say. I'm not showing them this only in this market right now, but I have a few properties that happened in 2010, in 2012, in 2016, just to show them that it's not a disease that we experience right now, but this has been the market across the board in Connecticut.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? If you have data that supports a longer term, then absolutely use it, right? Minimally, however, for what we all know is for the last 15 to 16 months, this has been what it is, and we fully expect it to continue through 2021 and perhaps into 2022, right? The negative about them waiting is that by 2022, prices and interest rates may have risen, and so what are you really saving, right? Are you saving face because you feel like you don't want the seller to win right now? I think that's kind of crazy town. People keep asking me as an investor, are you still buying? Like, are you kidding me? I wish there was more for me to buy. I'm ready to go. Am I spending more? Yes. But it's not about what you spend. It's about, do your numbers work, right? It doesn't matter how much a house costs. How many people are buying a house based on its actual closing price versus a monthly payment, right? Most people buy houses based on a monthly payment. And so if the monthly payment works, what does it matter how much you pay for the house?
I told them that.
Right. So just next time, make sure that you ask that question.
Yes.
Instead of telling them that, right? But again, it's all part of that larger picture, right? And if we have buyers that are stuck based on what it is they're spending, that's a different issue, right? That's either an ego issue or a miseducation or a undereducation issue.
Definitely ego. Definitely ego. I know.
Rick,
Yes,
I use
Lisa.
the analogy to my buyers when I lived in London for many, many years as a designer, but I also bought a lot of property because several properties over there. And so I learned the real estate market over there, which is a bit like the Wild West. And when they list a price, it has to be above that price. So I just sort of gave them the analogy, if when you look at the list price, you're going to need to start at that, or it has to be over.
Yeah.
And just kind of like what you said, but I explained to them that isn't a far out concept, because it's standard and basic in other countries when you're purchasing. Yeah,
the script I gave yesterday, I'll just repeat here today, and that is in multiple offer scenarios, the conversation with the buyers. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I've been told by the listing agent that there are multiple offers or multiple offers are expected within the next few hours, right? Because that's kind of what we're dealing with still today. Please note, the last thing I ever want to do is tell you to go and spend more money. However, in certain scenarios, this being one of them, that may be exactly what you have to do in order to come out on top. So to be clear, in a multiple offer situation in today's market, that usually means someone is at asking price, someone is below the asking price, and everybody else is above it at some level. Your first decision point is to determine which one of those people you want to be. Do you want to be the one at, below, or one of many above the asking price? Right? That's their first decision point. Because if they decide they want to be the one below, well, then the follow-up question is, understood. Talk to me about why you think that might actually win the day, knowing that there'll be a whole bunch of people way above the asking price, right? And so you have to help them see that where the offers are going to fall. Because trust me when I tell you, those of you who have been on the list side of things for the past 12 months, is that not an accurate statement? Somebody's at asking price, someone's below it, and everybody else is at some version of above the asking price. That's kind of how multiple offers, when you have 3, 4, 5, 7, 12 offers, that's how they go. And so helping people understand that and choosing where they want to be, and then having a conversation around, you know, the based on that choice, the likelihood of acceptance, right? Because the first choice is you have to be willing to pay over the asking price. The second then choice is how much insurance, how you're going to purchase over that asking price to come out on top, right? To help you determine where you're going to be. Silva.
Thank you. Two things very quickly. If they lose, it means to me that they clearly were not in love with the property. And they just let it go. And the motivation to get these properties not quite there. And also to what you just said a minute ago about how waiting can impact their buyer's power. There are slides on keeping current matters that I have in every price range, 400s, 200s, up to 700s. And I show them how one change of 1% in interest rate, or to that respect, an inflation, how it can eat up their buying power. And actually in a market where the prices are going up, they can double lose their buying power on both ends. So if you're not subscribed for keeping current matters, it's about $14 a month. It's so much worth it. And by the way, they actually connect to your social media and they post on your behalf very smart videos and data that you don't even know that you posted, and it attracts lots of attention.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is data, 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 and more data, right? People need to see the facts, right? So for those of you who are you know, kind of higher C's, and even those of you who are C's and kind of, well, really just more the C's, right? This comes naturally to you. The D's, the I's, and the S's, all that data doesn't come quite as naturally to you, right? And so recognize you have to maybe make a slight adjustment in your behavior to make the data come first to help people understand what it is the market is presenting to them. And the last thing I'll say is this, because we are out of time. So let's end on this. Remember, this is not a market for everybody, right? And it's okay, which is why I go back to a lot of these conversations sound more like lead generation issues than they do buyer and buyer's agent issues, right? Because clearly some of these folks, I think there are always additional things we can do to help educate at a higher level. And you may just have somebody who this is not the market for them to purchase in. The best way for you to tell is to come to a conversation, come to a point in a conversation that says, you know, it kind of sounds to me like maybe this is not the best market for you. Perhaps we should pull back and wait a bit and see what they do and say, right? If all of a sudden they're like, no, why would you say that? I can't. All right, well then you have a little bit more data now to know that there may be additional conversations. But going on record saying this doesn't sound like this is the best market for you. I'm curious, would it make you more comfortable if we kind of pulled back and waited?
That's a tough
knowing full well that that's not the right path, right? It's not the right path. Buying today, and so here's where I was going. The last thing I'll leave you with. Do remember and I don't say this to be mean, I really don't. Do remember that buyers are buying every single day.
Yes.
Right? And so that to me always means that we have to continue to challenge ourselves about how we're handling, how we're educating, how we're discussing, how we're asking questions, how we're consulting, how we're showing up for our own clients, right? Because it's not luck. Buyers don't just happen to, you're not the unlucky one who has the buyers who won't buy, right? We always have to be willing and able to go back and look at how we're bringing things to the table to be able to change that, to change our results. Don't make it about the buyers. Make it about your opportunities for doing something differently. Karen's getting a new mattress, I think. So, guys, with that, it was lovely to spend time with you. Thank you for your time and your talents. I learned a lot. I made a whole bunch of notes today. So thank you for a lot of those. And we will tune back in tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. So don't miss it. Have a great afternoon.